The first time I met a rape survivor, I was 20. I still remember that day vividly. The cold and wet weather. Rachel was dressed casually. She could have been any of my female friends, my stepsister, any of the women in this audience. Rachel spoke openly about how a friend that she trusted became a sexual abuser, how he trapped her and raped her, the jeans he was wearing, the smell of his aftershave, the screaming that got no response, her concern for getting pregnant or a sexually transmitted infection, her rejection from her family, her humiliation and struggle to be taken seriously by the police, how nothing had happened to this man whom she once called her friend. Can you imagine? I was saddened and frustrated. I'd read and heard about rape stories before, but for the first time, I was seeing its very real face and consequences. That was over a decade ago. I met Rachel when volunteering for a rape crisis center to speak out to groups of men in schools, in sports clubs, in rooms like this about sexual violence against women and its consequences. I grew up with parents that were open about sex, strong advocates for women's rights who gave me a strong sense of social justice. They were perhaps too open. Every week, my mum would ask me for an update on my sex life. This upbringing and experiences like meeting Rachel has shaped the person that I am. It's driven my work and my passions. It led me to research on sexual violence and the role of men in its prevention, and to work on men and women's sexual rights ever since. And it's led me to believe in a world where my female friends and future daughters don't have to worry that someone that they trust and love will become a sexual abuser, or they'll be forced to have unprotected sex. And that women of any age, whether here in Barcelona, in Ohio, in Delhi, in South Africa, can walk the streets alone, wearing whatever they choose, without fear of sexual assault. But it's also led me to believe more and more each day that the current response to promoting and protecting women's sexual rights will never succeed until we truly engage men. So what's the problem? Sexual and reproductive health and rights remain seen as a women's issue and primarily the responsibility and concern. Across the world today, in households and communities, women are left to carry the burden for avoiding unintended pregnancies and ensuring the healthy spacing of children. Currently, less than a quarter of contraceptive users worldwide are men. In South Africa, where I'm from, some women walk for hours alone to access the nearest clinic to get a contraceptive injection. And other women who take the pill fear each and every day that their partner will find out that they're using contraception and respond violently. And this is made worse by power differences, which mean that when a woman goes to bed with a man, it can be difficult for her to insist on the use of condoms. Where are the men supporting these women and accessing contraception? Recently in Malawi, I met a man who told me that in marriage he had the right to have sex, that family planning was his wife's responsibility. When I challenged him, he told me men need sex more than women do, and that's what women expect. This man, reflecting the behavior and views of so many others, put his own sexual pleasure and his sexual desire before the rights and safety of his partner. This man didn't think that the implications of unintended pregnancy or HIV and AIDS was his responsibility. And this is why I believe more and more that we can continue to empower women as much as we like through education, programs, and other means. But if these women return each night to the same abusive partner, we may have achieved very little. In fact, we may have put these women more at risk. For too long, in our programs, our policies, and our commitments, we've talked about sexual and reproductive health without explicitly focusing on the roles of men. The role of men as partners with responsibility around contraception, as clients of services in their own right, and of agents of change in their households and communities. Therefore, what I want to say to you today is it's time to talk differently about sexual and reproductive health and rights. We need to talk about this as everyone's issue. We need to challenge men's behavior and reinforce the supportive behaviors that many men are already taking. We need to recognize men's vested interests and responsibility too. Rape and unintended pregnancies affect men also. We are the partners, fathers, sons, husbands, friends, and lovers of these women. But we also need to be concerned for men's own needs. We're not very good at looking after our sexual health. We tend to go to health services only when we're very sick, and we avoid sexual health and family planning clinics. Currently in Africa, far lower rates of men than women access HIV treatment and testing services. But this is also an issue here in Europe and in Spain. I wonder how many men in this room have recently been for a sexual health test or have supported their partner in accessing those services. I've worked in family planning clinics in Bangladesh where 98% of the clients were female. The men in that community told me that the service wasn't for them. It didn't respond to their needs. That real men didn't look after their health or the health of their partners. But later, those same men told me in confidence about their own sexual health concerns. The concerns about keeping an erection. The concerns with infection. Their lack of understanding of their own bodies or the bodies of their partners. These men allowed their traditional idea of manhood to prevent them from accessing the services that they need. This is bad for men, but it's also bad for women. So we need to challenge men and support those who are already behaving responsibly. But we also need to have concern for men's own health needs and work with men and women together for everyone's sexual and reproductive health. This is the work that I do. I work for Sonke Gender Justice in South Africa. We work to build the capacity of individuals, civil society, and government to promote gender equality, prevent sexual violence and HIV, and enhance sexual and reproductive health and rights. We are men and women of all races and sexualities working together. In Zambia, together with the youth activist Levi Wiri and others, we're working with men to change their behaviors around sexual and reproductive health and rights through the provision of specific services and outreach. And we've seen amazing results. Take Henry Kunda. Before our work, Henry believed that family planning was just his wife's responsibility. But now he supports his wife around these issues. They communicate on sexual health. He looks after his own health. And he's an advocate for these issues to other men and women in his community through outreach and other activities. We're also supporting the next generation of gender justice leaders in Africa, such as Danny Goto in Uganda. Danny recently supported one of our leadership training courses, and we are helping him with his incredible work to address and scale up advocacy for safe abortion services for women in Uganda. And in South Africa, Sonke's One Man Can campaign has reached thousands of men and women across the country to enable them to take action for gender equality in their homes, in their relationships, and in their communities. And through our coordination of the Men Engage Africa network, we're working with men and women together to scale this work up across Africa and to create an Africa-wide movement for change. We're not just doing this work in communities, but we're working and engaging government to ensure that these important interventions are reflected in laws and policies. Men like me shouldn't be thanked for doing this work. We need to make this work as an important part of their identity, as their education and their careers. But we do need to support men and make sure they are part of the solution. So what about you here? Are you part of the solution? Do you continue to see gender inequalities and the need to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights as an age-old problem that will never change, and be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge? Or do you take action now? I was inspired by Rachel over a decade ago, never to remain silent. So here's my challenge to you. Men, listen to women about why these issues are important. Speak out on women's sexual rights. Support your partner, male or female, to access the contraception that they need. And look after your own sexual health. Women, never remain silent. I challenge you to continue to speak out on your rights and to allow men to support you in doing so. Speak to your partner and help and encourage men to be more responsible around sexual and reproductive health and rights for their benefit and for yours. And I challenge all of us. Let's all work together so that sexual and reproductive health and rights is no longer just seen as a women's issue, but we see men's involvement, their support, and their access to services as a central part of ensuring everyone's sexual and reproductive health and rights. I am Tim Shand. I am a man working for gender equality. Like all of us, I am a man in progress.